I hope that everyone, not only in security, kind of builds that curiosity, because we're entering an age right now, and you know this because you're working in security, of AI and emerging technologies that are coming through, where there's no an option anymore. You can be in security or not, it doesn't matter. You can be a mom at home. You need to understand this now. You need to understand, what tools are we using? What type of tool? Why do you need it? What does it access? You want to understand, you want to identify if he has access to sensitive data, if he has access to global data. There's so many questions you have to ask in order for you to say, okay, we're going to be using this tool. I'm building something in the company to increase our revenue, but what about, I'm creating something to clean the water in the oceans. I'm creating something to actually make sure that we grow more food, and let's just measure the crops or something like that. Only diverse backgrounds will think of different things because they come from a country maybe that they saw lack of water. Another one maybe lack of resources on business. Another one lack of resources on maybe their ocean was never clean and there was a lot of garbage. We can bring all of these perspectives together, and having leadership that has that initiative, that are diverse, will take us places, and we can actually do more good than harm with AI and what's coming.
Meet Felicita Sandoval, a powerhouse in AI and cybersecurity who's been shaping digital security for over 18 years across government, investigations, and enterprise technology. As CEO of Sentient Perspectives, she's on a mission to democratize AI and cybersecurity education. She also paves the way for inclusive leadership as co-founder of Latinas in Cyber. Felicita, welcome to the Be Fearless podcast.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited. And you said it right, Felicita. You can also call me Fifi throughout.
Okay, Fifi? Okay. So let's talk about your background, career journey. You've had quite a unique path from finance and fraud investigations to now a PhD candidate managing compliance while also giving cybersecurity education and training. What motivates you to keep on challenging yourself?
I think this is a sentiment that I think a lot of us in security share, and is that I love learning. I think if you don't love learning, it's difficult to understand security because everything changes every single day and we have to be on top of it. So, and I also love applying what I learn, which with that, you have a knack for enjoying challenges. So even if it's something that you learn academically or something that you learn personally, I feel that is so rewarding. And that's what I love the most.
So you like to learn, right? And I do think that the best way to learn is once you read something or you experience something, whether it's YouTube video or class or whatever it is that you're doing, being able to apply it pretty quickly is a key part of taking it in, right? Mm-hmm. And making it like your own. I think that's really key to learning. And I try to do that myself. I tend to read things or read books and try to apply it as soon as I learn it. I'm trying to figure out hey, how do I use this in my practical day to day? The other thing that I think is also important about what you said was that cybersecurity, you have to keep learning. I think from the technology keeps shifting around us, and there's more and more technologies that come out every single day, different applications of that technology in different ways to meet whatever business challenges present. If you're not continuously learning, it's going to be really hard to keep up. And I think that there's two parts of it. There's kind of a GRC perspective. I think the landscape for regulations and law change at a much slower pace. They definitely are not keeping up with the details of how technology is applied to meet whatever. And they're not going to keep up with hackers and attackers. So there's kind of a slow moving current that's the legal and regulation kind of space. But I think from a technology being deployed and being used by engineers, that is a fast moving shape. That's fast moving. And that's where the threats are occurring. And that's where the attacks happen. And that's how companies are taken advantage of. Yeah, keeping up with all that is a challenge. And if you don't like to learn, it's really hard to stay on top of things in cyber.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I love, because you're a CISO, And you know this, that a lot of us, the engineers and cybersecurity, we look up to you. We look up to CISOs. And when we see our CISOs that are like learning and applying what they're learning, and it just kind of trickles down into that security culture. And I just find it fascinating when I see CISOs that are also practicing, like doing labs, practical things with tools. I love that.
Yeah, I don't know how much my teams like it, but I do. I mean, again, it's like I have like a little Kubernetes cluster over here with, S3 on MinIO, and I play around a lot with technology just to kind of keep up with what's going on. And I would hope that they would be. I think that's the culture that I want, is one of continuous learning and continuous experimentation and challenging yourself all the time. But that's not every company that you work for. Different companies move at different paces, and it is what it is, right? So
yeah,
I like it that you like it.
It's a huge thing. Like now, from the entrepreneur side, learning and applying it has helped me actually build the company. I relate a lot to Mark. Mark Cuban is a huge entrepreneur, and he always says that he also enjoys learning. And you can see it because you can see all his investments. He invested in like a drug company. He invested in I think how he became a millionaire. I think it was broadcast.com. So that's communication. Then he's the Mavs owner, or he was the Mavs owner.
Right.
And so it's sports. So it's like all of these different industries. But that's what keeps him alive, is learning. And that has always happened to me. And I think that I hope that everyone, not only in security, kind of builds that curiosity, because we're entering an age right now, and you know this because you're working in security, of AI and emerging technologies that are coming through, where there's an option anymore. You can be in security or not. It doesn't matter. You can be a mom at home. You need to understand this now. So
yeah, everyone does. I mean, I've tried to get my dad to use ChatGPT and get my brothers to use it, my wife to use it, because it's kind of amazing technology, and there's a lot, and this is just easy stuff, just interacting with it and asking questions and trying to figure out things, right? But I think for businesses, I think generative AI is a big opportunity for everyone, and we're just at the beginning of this long marathon, and how do we adopt it, and how do we use it safely, et cetera. Well, let's talk a little bit about Sentient Perspectives. Sentient Perspectives focuses on educating people on new age technologies, including AI, quantum computing, cybersecurity, and other things. Tell us more about what you're hoping to achieve from Sentient Perspectives.
So there are two things that I am hoping to achieve, and I think you're going to agree with them, but especially one of them. So first is help people not fear emerging technologies. And I'm talking workforce, people outside the workforce, education. We need to stop fearing it, because yesterday, I remember everything was about the cloud. Then today it's all about AI. Tomorrow it's going to be about quantum. And then what are we going to do? Are we always going to fear this? Is this, how we want to embrace the future? So I want people to stop fearing that, and to understand that they actually can do this. They can actually understand this. And the second thing, which is one of the things that I apply everywhere, is a security mindset for every single person. In an organization, security is just not my job. It's not just your job. It's every single person's job that is building something, that is actually using these advanced technologies to make sure that we do it safely. So those are the two top things that I want to really put out there.
Right. I think that not fearing the technology, I think, is good. I read an article in The Economist a couple of weeks ago. They were talking about, there's a lot of aspirational hopes by CEOs and boards to use Gen AI technology and AI to, improve their productivity, et cetera. But the Economist article was actually talking about how the middle management and the people that are supposed to be benefiting from or deploying Gen AI technologies, that they're kind of like slow rolling it, right? They're not taking advantage of it, as much as the executives want them to do. From my understanding of the article, it was really somewhat because people were fearing that it was going to replace them or going to, make them redundant, right? And I think that's probably a legitimate fear in some cases. But I imagine that part of what you're doing with Sentient Perspectives is teaching people not fear it from a usability perspective, but how can they use it to do better in their careers?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yes, absolutely. That's what we're doing, and I love the fact that we do it in the workforce, which is career based, and then also entrepreneurs, students, the community, so they can understand the foundations. Because there's two different paths. You have the career based, and then you have also the regular usage day to day. And yes, the first thing that they think of is like, I'm going to lose my job. This is going to, they're going to replace me. And unfortunately, that comes with the fact that a lot of the times, this year and last year, there was a lot of layoffs in different companies. So we think, oh my God, AI, that's it. That's why actually they're having layoff. And sometimes that's not the case. So it's just building that foundation. But then there is the other side of the community of people who are thinking, I'm not smart enough, or I don't have time, or this is too complicated, because they're thinking that I'll have to now go to school, learn mathematics, algorithms. I don't have time for that. And unless you want to be a machine learning engineer or an AI engineer, that's not the case. You just need to understand the foundations. What is AI? What does AI do and it does not do? And we have to understand that from executive leadership all the way until outside of corporate, which is the community. What are AI agents? And so once you understand the foundations and then you go into what is AI, at least understand the ethics side of it, and you end up with, okay, now let me think of all of this with a security mindset. So I think that's what we love to, what I actually do for everyone that comes in to take our trainings.
Yeah. So in some ways you want to demystify AI, right? Make sure that people understanding what it can do, I think there's a lot of hype in AI today, and it's not as, ChatGPT and Claude and the tools that we have available to us, they make it easy for us as lay people to kind of access AI for research purposes or summarization or those kind of purposes. But taking AI and then moving it into productivity and actually using it for customer service or sales or marketing or whatever these other use cases that businesses want, that's a little bit more difficult to do than folks realize when they kind of embark on this journey. And then from a security perspective, it's also, what data do you feed it? How is that data being used? Are you getting what you expect out of it? Are you protecting intellectual property? Are you able to shield all the confidential data that you have inside your organization from folks that don't need to know certain confidential information inside the business? Putting all of those, I guess the example I always use for that would be, HR data. Not everyone needs to know, or at least in the United States, we don't think that everyone needs to know like what everyone's getting paid. Yeah. Right. So if you had that information in your system, how do you keep that safe from people that, hey, how much does John make? And then, you don't want the AI to come back and say, hey, John makes X amount of dollars per year. Right. Exactly. So some of it is controlling how you access data inside. Again, the technical implementation of how you use it is completely different than the usability parts of it. Yeah. So demystifying that is important. Right. Understanding what the capabilities are is important. Understanding how to, what your use cases are and what potential threats are out there, whether they're inside or external threats, or how these systems are compromised. That's also interesting. Right. Yeah. So there's lots to do in AI and generative AI in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why you build a foundation first. That's why we build the foundation first, and then we go into the practical side. Now, what we have to tailor it, like you said. How can we use AI for insecurity? How can we use AI in marketing? How can we use AI? When it comes to corporations, implementing AI is not as easy. There's some processes that that have to be placed. There's new guidelines that you have to create, new policies that may not be able to be created right now because we're still working on it. We're still implementing. We don't even know what we're going to do. Are we going to actually have AI in our client data workflows? Are we not? So it is a little bit more complicated. So that's why I do believe that organizations on their own, corporate organizations, need their own special training outside of everything else.
Oh, let me make sure I understand. So you're thinking that, outside of just the foundations and the technology, that's training in and of itself, but then you have to take the corporate context for example, what your code of conduct is and what the culture of your company is, or what the ethical considerations that your company has, and take that information, kind of apply it to how you're going to be using your use cases.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And what do you have in place in regards to governance? Are we having these tools? And I hope companies do, but you have that vendor management process. You work together with sourcing. You bring in a tool. You're going to assess it. So do you need to access? Are you going to access any data? Is there going to be? Is this going to be global? And once you have that assessment, you have to make sure that you assess. Do I need to take an extra step and go through a governance review where I need to have privacy? I need to have legal look at this just in case if there are any client contracts that are at stake here. There's so many questions you have to ask. What controls are in place? So there's so much. That's why I understand why some corporations are still a little bit behind. It's because they're trying to figure out how can we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, in my own experience in rolling out generative AI technologies, at Dyson, is that there are so many questions. You have legal questions, you have ethical questions, you have security questions. The business wants to do something, right? And then there's so many vendors out there that I think that I did some research. And as I recall, you made between at the time, I think, and the number, I'm getting this number wrong, but I know there were way more than 2,000 companies that were seed and Series A funded companies that were just doing generative AI. And I think the number was almost 4,000. It was somewhere in this number. There's just so many companies that are saying that they're doing AI and generative AI today. And then every company, Google, Microsoft, AWS, everyone is kind of filling the marketplace with more AI tools and technologies to use inside your organization.
Yeah.
And the questions start with even, do we want to use this at all, right? Can we protect our intellectual property? If the system gives us an answer, how do we know that we're being protected from an indemnity perspective? Meaning that if I use something and then I get a copyright infringement lawsuit against me, who's going to protect me, right? What is that going to look like? And do we have the right contracts and stuff in place so that we can be protected? I think that's a big part of vendor selection, is making sure that, whatever tools and technologies you're going to use are going to protect you. But it's very complex, right? And with respect to hallucinations, it gives an answer. And how do we know the answer is true? And, and I think from my perspective, and I said this multiple times, it's, when I talk to people, I always have a critical thinking lens on. And I don't know if that's just being a CISO. Every time someone gives me an answer, I'm always thinking, is this answer correct? Right? Is it believable? And those kinds of things. And I think that critical thinking, when you're interacting with Gen AI in particular, is something else that you got to make sure that you know how to manage, not just your humans doing it, but if you're doing it programmatically, how are you managing this from an API perspective, and how are you controlling for craziness that might come out of these Gen AI tools?
Absolutely. And that's when you have your guidelines in place on how to use AI, I think that helps a lot. But I would love your opinion on this too. I don't know if you're starting to see this, but as the AI tools come in, you have different, depending on the company, how big it is, maybe you have an engineering department and you have developers and you have IAM access. So everyone wants to use a tool. They're excited. So they're putting the request to get a tool. But at the same time, a lot of those tools are similar, but they don't even know it. So then the company's spending money on tools that can do the same thing. So what process do you put in place in order for you to avoid adding to the tech debt in the company?
Yeah. I mean, big companies, like big banks like JP Morgan Chase, because I have direct experience with that, and Dyson and other big companies. We typically have procurement processes in place and IT processes in place so that we don't keep duplicating technologies. And this happens. Everything goes crazy and you have a proliferation of applications that you have in your environment. I think at Dyson on our desktops, we had 18,000 different pieces of software that were out there. And on the desktops. And that doesn't count for SaaS products, right? And I can tell you, horrible stories about doing audits in places and that, we had 230 or 240 applications that were part of our SaaS and our conditional access and our MFA and SSO kind of constructs for SaaS apps. And then we did an audit and we had another 600 some plus apps that were just shadow SaaS, that people were logging in with their corporate credentials and just, just having their own passwords and stuff. They weren't part of the SSO and such, right? So shadow SaaS, Gen AI tools, and the proliferation of them, and, extensions that are in your browsers and everything, they're just such a big issue, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like, how do you handle that asset management aspect of it, of like, duplication of AI tools?
Yeah, and duplicative tools, right? And so there's typically a rationalization process. And if you have a good procurement system, right, and IT is working with procurement, then what will happen is you'll start to see that there is a lot of duplicate. And, hopefully your procurement team will say, well, don't we already have this? This looks like the same product, right? And so, or IT can say, hey, this looks like the same product. But it depends on whether you have centralized or federated or, random chaos kind of processes in your business. If you have random chaos processes in your business, you're going to have lots of duplicative products. In Gen AI space in particular, because it's so new, organizations are still trying to figure out what form factor is going to win, right? So like what I saw, it was lots and lots of experimentation. On the business side, we're adamant that this is the tool that we need to use for Gen AI for development, software development. And then, I talked to them, a month later, and they're like, yeah, that didn't really work the way we want to. So we want to look at these products. And they were just looking at products and looking at products and looking at products. Inside that organization, we had really strong procurement practices and really good processes around how do we do vendor selections and product selections. And we just weren't taking advantage of it. So I think what companies need to do is make sure that they do have something to do from a product and vendor selection perspective. Make sure they use those processes to make those decisions about what's good for their business, even in terms of Gen AI tools and technologies, right? So I think that's, especially if it's going to be rolled out to a lot of users or potentially a lot of users, like thinking hundreds and thousands of users, I think it's really important that you don't create a lot of problems between different business organizations by having different products and technologies. Because if you just think of something as simple as drawing tools, right, or word processing software, if you can't have your business use, you create something in Word, and then no one else can use it because they're using some other product, or you can't use their materials because it's coming from some other application. Those create a lot of unnecessary frictions for word processing. Gen AI is kind of in a different space because, again, it's just not as mature of an offering. So you're going to see lots of proliferation. And my advice would be use your vendor and procurement processes, and then don't sign long-term contracts, and have spend going on for years for things that you're not actually using.
Love it. It's exciting.
A lot of risk. Well, anyway, so on top of your work at Sentient, you also have to juggle being a security professional at LiveRamp. What challenges did you have to overcome in this regard, like with respect to being a security professional too?
If you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, they will tell you that many of them had a job while they were building their business. And sometimes for many years, like 3 to 5 years, in order for them to have their business take off. So eventually at the end, you have to make a decision at some point when you see that your company's taking off, that either you stay in the job or you go, because you have to dedicate a full time to your business. But a lot of us, you have bills to pay, you have to eat, you have to pay your home. So you stay in the job while you start building little by little that business. Now, I am extremely lucky, and I will admit it, that I love LiveRamp. I love the company that I work for. If I would stay there forever. I love their products. I love what they stand for, their culture, and especially I love management. I mean, the executive leadership is great. And I will talk about the security leadership. They are amazing. I mean, talk about people who really love innovating. They're supportive, that not only do they provide the best products, but they encourage all of their employees to be successful both inside and outside of the company. So I'm extremely lucky on that. But I also have to share that it is difficult, but since I am very passionate about what I'm doing, not only at LiveRamp, but what I'm doing outside in my business with Sentient Perspectives, then I actually had to make a choice. So what I did is that I used my time and divided it to make sure that I am able to do all of the things and comply with everything that I am actually saying that I'm going to deliver for my company. So I make sure that I carve out time. And that's one of the difficult parts. I think that entrepreneurs have to have a job. But for me, I did it from the beginning. I was like, I wake up at 5 a.m. every day. I wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to work until 7 to 7:30 in the morning on my business. I start my company job, and then at 5 or 6, I'm done. And then I have an hour to eat, exercise, whatever it is, walk. And then I'm going to work another 3 to 4 hours on my business. And that's what I do. I am lucky that they're very flexible with our extracurricular activities outside of the corporation. But one thing that I will say, because I want to make sure that people understand this, if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening and you have a business and a job, I will say something: never lose the quality of your full-time job, because you were hired to do something and you have to respect that, even if you're super passionate about your business. If you want to put all of your time to your business, then you have to leave your job. So that's one of the things that I'm very proud of myself, that I make sure that my quality is out there in my full-time job as well as my business, and that all the job is being done, and that I'm there supportive, and that's my number one priority. So after doing this for the entrepreneurship side for a year, I learned how to make both number one priority. Now I think I have got the grasp of it, but it took a lot of work and a lot of discipline to be able to wake up that early and really use the whole time and still have at least 5 hours of sleep and be healthy. So yeah. It's long, but
that's a lot. And then on top of that, you're also co-founder of Latinas in Cyber, and working on minority representation for both women and Latin Americans. I mean, that's got to be taken up. That's another part of what you're splitting your time against. I mean, you're juggling a lot here.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Latinas and Cyber. What kind of misconceptions do you think that you're actively working to change there?
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you, I will say that I do have an advantage aside from, having a job that I love, that I'm passionate about. But it's also that I don't have children. So I know that it takes a lot when you have kids and you have a family to take care of. I understand it's a little bit of an extra, but it doesn't mean that you can never make it. You could. So I do use my time for myself and a little bit for my family. But when it comes to Latinas in Cyber, and I am also an advisor on other companies, so I know that I do juggle a lot, but I think it's just I love it because it's a special cause. Latinas in Cyber was a beautiful project that it was created by a group of women who we saw that there was a lack of Latina representation in cybersecurity. I remember that I will go into events and people come to me and say, I never seen a Latina like you, like in cybersecurity. And it's interesting because when people tell me that, or when people ask me, Fifi, do you have anyone that you can recommend as a Latina speaker, Spanish speaker? At that time, I was like, wait, I don't know anyone. That's so true. So, we have decided to take action and create something that was meaningful. So we created the organization. I'm not as active in the organization anymore. I am actually an advisor for them, and they have done a wonderful job. We have certified over 1,000 women already in cybersecurity. So that's already an accomplishment. But what I will say is that the impact that diversity groups make is huge. And I think that executive leaderships, or those that actually have the power to hire, we should look into that as well. And not only Latinas, Latinas in Cyber, you could be any age, any gender, any background. It's okay. Any race, you are able to actually come in. It's just that the initiative is for Latinas. But I think that we should have more initiatives everywhere, in every diverse group, to be able to bring those resources. So I'm very proud of that work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting being American English speaking. And it seems like everything that is like most technology that's out there is targeted at me, English speaking American. And it's easy for me to find resources. I think that it's so much harder. Again, I think I told you before we started that my mother is Peruvian, and my my grandmother, she just died a couple of years ago. She lived her whole life in Peru, as you would expect. She being Peruvian. Yeah. And then, but I remember going to Peru, just dealing with like lots of like cybersecurity type of threats. Just visiting my grandmother in Trujillo, and just kind of the lack of resources, like for her to find something that would be helpful in Spanish was seemed to be so difficult. And so, and also for my uncle who, who's in Miami, who spends most of his time speaking Spanish, his English is very good, but if he wants to understand something, he's going to want to see it in Spanish. Is there continuing to be a lack of materials in other languages for people that allow them to, make strides from an education perspective in the Latino community?
I believe so. Yeah. Yes. I was just a few weeks ago, it's called Hispanic Unity, and it's an organization that helps people or individuals to start their entrepreneurship path. And some of them are learning English as we speak, and they really had difficulty finding those resources. And I didn't even know the Hispanic Unity was available. So that's how much the lack of marketing and the lack of assistance to bring those resources and put them out there and tell people, hey, there is resources in your language, any just Spanish, Mandarin, right? Any language that we can actually provide to you so you can actually succeed. And within that, of course, you will instill, like I like to tell people, especially your Hispanic community, as you actually are building your business or you're actually studying and getting prepared for a career, make sure that you're learning your English as you go as well. So that way they are actually having an advantage as well. But we should have these resources available. And I do see the lack of it. And it's sad, but I think that comes from a lot of us that have a platform to be able to put those resources out there. That's what I think and what I like to do and what I do.
Yeah, I haven't tried ChatGPT in Spanish. I know that I have friends that translate, English to Japanese or English to other languages, and they use ChatGPT to help them with translation. Maybe ChatGPT can help kind of bridge that gap between the technical stuff, because even your programming languages are all written in, it's all English. Like when you're like doing loops and stuff.
Yes.
And it's all English words that are being used for programming too. I mean, it's just kind of, again, the lack of resources and lack of capabilities that we have in other languages, I think, is somewhat startling when you think that Chinese may be the second most.
I think so. I think Mandarin is like the second most.
Second, and then I think Spanish is up there, maybe like third, right? Something like that, right? And it's like, even for like the second most, popular language and the third most popular languages, we're not seeing resources that are meant for those communities and tools that are meant for those communities. It was somewhat startling. I think that, giving people the advice to learn English, I think, is a good one. But I also think it's somewhat unfortunate that we just don't have internationalization kind of technologies for everyone. I guess that would make it more confusing too.
And that's like a lot of, they're so talented. Like there's talent out there because they don't speak English. But I think that's where AI is coming in, or advanced technologies are coming in. And that's where we're going to actually be using them, is to provide that kind of advantage to them, to those people that have a lot of ideas, that are really sharp at what they do, that they come from other countries, and we can leverage AI in order for them to translate. I have used ChatGPT because I speak Spanish. I was born here, but I lived in Puerto Rico for 10 years when I was a kid. So I speak Spanish. However, when I write it, I also can write it, but the grammar is pretty bad. So I actually always tell ChatGPT, please translate this. This is horrible. But I think that it would help. And that's the kind of trainings that I also bring. When I was speaking to the Hispanic Unity, he was bringing them a program for business entrepreneurs to understand how to use AI to market their business. So there is sources out there, and we just have to put our part into it. And something fast that I was going to say, because you mentioned earlier about like there's more resources that you can see for a person that is whiter or lighter skin, and everybody should have an opportunity. Everyone,
absolutely,
white, Hispanic, Asian, everyone should have an opportunity, because the more people we have innovating, the better.
Yeah, just technology lifts all boats, right? It makes our economies better and makes more opportunities for everyone. So, I mean, I agree. And I think we have a lot of opportunities to grow into over the next, upcoming years, just because of new technology. Like we're talking about quantum technology and quantum computing and everything else. There's so many opportunities, and the more people we can get in the workforce that are able to take advantage of the technology, I think the better off the world will be. Right. I mean, that's how we're going to solve problems, is through making information and education and tools and technologies available to everyone. And so when they take their diverse approach and they have a good idea on how to solve electricity in small communities in Africa. If they don't have those opportunities, they don't have the access to this, then it's going to make it difficult for those people to help find those opportunities, right? So, well, anyways, let's talk a little bit about AI, because I mean we're kind of talking about, on our side, at SquareX, we've been doing a lot of research on browser AI agents, and right now we're talking about like browser AI agents now being the weakest link, rather than humans. And we talked about ChatGPT, but browser AI agents are a little bit different. It's like you have ChatGPT or some other AI technology that's doing work for you on your behalf inside the browser, and you can say, "Hey, go do some research for me on the best baseball players from Venezuela, and send me a report." And it'll go do the research, and it'll go create that report for you right there in your browser using your identity. But it doesn't have any sense of security at all, right? When folks are using like browser AI agents and this AI technology, what are your thoughts on how you would advise enterprises when it comes to using such tools like this?
So that was interesting. That's interesting. So I still think that humans are the weakest link. Like I still think so, because we are the ones who are actually training these models, right? We're creating these AI agents. We're the ones who are using the data to train them to do this. So I still think we are the weakest link, and that's why we have to. I mean, my advice would be that we have to create processes in place. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, and I'll repeat it. You need to understand what tools are we using. What type of tool? Why do you need it? What does it access? You want to understand, like you want to identify if he has access to sensitive data, if he has access to global data. Like there's so many questions you have to ask in order for you to say, okay, we're going to be using this tool. So you want to have the governance process that we already talked about. You want to evaluate what kind of data the tool has access and how it's used in order to consider, okay, is our data trained to use to train the models, right? Or is there any privacy concerns that must be addressed early in the process? Mm-hmm. So we have to have that expertise, and then we need to have our experts that we mentioned earlier, which is you want to have your privacy, your legal, your compliance, and your security experts online, and even global, if it's global, online, to make sure that each of them are able to review and approve each one of those areas for those particular tools. So browser AI, I think AI agents, we're still the weakest link, and then they're second. But who knows? Maybe one day we're going to be able to social engineer them too. And I think we now, I know a lot. I love how some of our pen testers are like playing with it and making it do crazy things. But I don't know your take on that. If you still think,
I've always hated whenever something bad happens in an organization, and it's like someone clicked a phishing link, and they typed in their username and password into a impersonating website or whatever. It's easy for management and executive management to look at that and say, man, what's wrong with our people, right? Why do they do that?
Yeah.
And I've always really disliked the term that humans are the weakest link, right? Because I think most of the time, like what you're saying, I think with respect to browser AI agents, and that people are still the weakest link. It's, there's two parts that I think you're referring to in the explanation. One is the developers, the engineers that are actually building this technology. What are they doing with respect to how do they secure it, and how do they put guardrails around it so that they can deliver secure software that is trained properly to do whatever they should be doing with the browser AI agent, right? There's that one part. Then there's the enterprise governance, legal procurement kind of perspective, which is, have people use those processes to make sure that they're making good decisions, and roll yourself into those processes so that you're not choosing technology to put on your system that could put you at risk. But I think there's a third part, right, which is often where I find the gap, which is the technology. how do we use technology? And we use technology all the time to defend, whether it's firewalls or intrusion prevention systems or EDR in our tools. And those capabilities are putting defense and depth kind of technologies in place to help us, because people are going to make mistakes, right? We're not all going to be security experts and know everything that's happening inside of a company and third-party risk and what libraries they're using, how it gets done, and vulnerability management processes and everything else that could go wrong inside your defense strategy. But there are technologies that we can use to defend inside the browser, right? Defend against, the proliferation of shadow SaaS, people uploading documents into tools that are unsanctioned by the organization, or copying and pasting materials between different web tabs, browser tabs, right, inside your organization. And it's the application of those technologies and making sure that you have the right kind of technologies in place as well, right? Because you're not going to be able to, govern yourself out of risk. You're hoping that those processes will help you reduce risk. Your engineers are going to develop tools and technologies that are using third-party libraries, because that's like most of what we use today is third-party libraries to develop technology. Those are going to have vulnerabilities that we know or we may not know. But having another layer of defense inside, for me in particular, coming from SquareX, from a browser, is like, how do we detect threats that are happening in browsers, whether it's a Gen AI threat, phishing, sites being impersonated, et cetera. Having technology in your browser, from our research, we think that like 80% of people's time is actually in a browser today. Defend them where they are is maybe a good approach too. But
yeah, that's true. I like what you said. What you just said reminded me of, I went to an event and there was a keynote speaker and he had shown some data, and sorry, I don't remember the resource, but that from about 20 years ago till now, you can see the decrease on malware attacks, because you can see that we have better tools now to defend against it. But phishing has increased, and that's because of the lack of tools. So he was also arguing the fact that the human is not the weakest link. It's just that we don't have tools in place, or the right tools in place to prevent this. So that's pretty interesting.
I would, if you happen to find that resource, I would love to review it. I'll go see if I can find it on my own as well. But
I'll ask him. Actually, the keynote speaker is my mentor, so I'll ask him. Yeah, because he was
because I think that from my perspective, that's exactly what's happening. It's like the number of attacks that are happening that where EDR is going to save you, like malware kind of instance, has dropped off a lot. I mean, if you look at the Mandiant reports and the Palo Alto reports on how breaches in the Verizon DBIR, those are showing that most of the attacks are just the kind of attacks that are ended up in an incident. About 70% of them actually traverse the browser. And that's the one place that as organizations, we don't defend against. And then along with that is that we have a lot more technology that is being introduced to us every day. So we have cloud, right? Which, begets software as a service. So we have a lot more applications that are coming out for us. And then those are all being accessed via browsers. Browsers are becoming more capable every single day, or every year, maybe not every day, but you have this kind of flywheel. You have cloud, makes it easy to get resources so that you can build an app. You have folks that are just building SaaS apps. You have your browsers becoming more complicated, that are taking advantage of the new technologies that are being delivered through these SaaS apps. And it's just this circle of chaos that is very hard to control when you're using traditional technologies like, proxy servers or EDR tools, et cetera, that are protecting your desktop, but what's protecting you where your users are inside your browser. You should take a look at it. If you haven't looked at SquareX, take a look.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna look at it, and that is so interesting. I know that's like a whole conversation on its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty interesting.
Well, tell us a little bit about your research interests. You have a doctorate in computer science and information assurance. Tell us about your research interests there.
Oh wow! So my doctorate program, that is it's so much fun. This is my third year that I'm gonna enter, and I just took a break. I'm taking a break, and I'm coming back this fall. And it's really exciting. So when you pursue a doctorate, you have to do a dissertation, which is a research. But you can typically you cannot share too much information about your dissertation because it can actually affect the testing and the quality control of the quantitative analysis. But what I can share is that my research interest is focused on humanoids. So everything that what I do is that I'm discovering everything that has to do with the area where the humanoids are in the space of humans. So what data is being used to train those humanoids to operate in human environments? So that's what I'm researching. And it goes really deeper into that. I can reveal much, but I'm super excited about the work because everything is going so fast. That is incredible. And I know there's so much conversations about quantum, which that's going to even make it even, speed it up even more. So I have a feeling that soon we're going to have the humanoids kind of ready to be in the human spaces, especially I believe where we need them the most at this moment, which is like healthcare, manufacturing, even because in manufacturing we have already robots, but we don't have humanoids. So we may have humanoids there, and then little by little it will be trickled down to I have a humanoid that is the babysitter of my kid, so something like that. So I think we're getting there. And what I want to do now is, okay, let's see what data is being used. How are these humanoids going to actually be able to interact with this human environment? Do we have controls in place for whenever the control doesn't work or somebody hacks into it and now it harms someone? Can it harm someone? How can it harm someone? So all of that is what I'm working on. It's pretty exciting stuff.
And it sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I have a video from Morgan Stanley I'll send you that talks about the future of AI and moving from digital spaces where we kind of have AI and then how that moves into physical spaces. And part of it is humanoids. I'll send you that video. Maybe I'll link it in the show notes here too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, looking ahead at to 2025 and beyond, right? How critical is inclusive leadership and diversity in shaping the future of AI? We're talking about humanoids, we talked about AI, we talked about Gen AI, we talked about inclusivity. How critical is leadership and diversity in shaping the future of AI?
It's very, very important because, we all come from different parts of the world, either here in the United States and other countries, and bringing diverse perspectives from the leadership stand. It leads for better innovation. It creates the culture and it trickles it down, like I said, to the bottom. Actually, we are the top. I always like to say it, to the top. And organizations should embrace these values by hiring diverse talent that can lead different projects. Because if you think about it, when we create technology, right, you're bringing all of those different perspectives. So it gives us an opportunity not only to contribute, but to lead better in the new technology that is coming. So if you combine age, gender, racial diversity, it creates a really powerful and innovative environment. Mm-hmm. So I was having a conversation with a woman who she's retired, and she was telling me, "Oh my God, I have so much to give. I have so much to bring." She used to be a leader, an executive leader in the communications industry. And she's like, and now I'm retired. I feel like, what do I do with all of this knowledge? So I feel bringing that talent back, even for people that are retired in their 60s, that have all of this knowledge to give us and to even add to this technology, is something that we should look forward to. And also in perspective to our young entry-level career professionals or career transitioners that also have a big perspective in leadership as well. For example, I come from the company that I work for. A lot of my management, they're in their 20s. And I learned so much from them. And I also learned from the older folks. So that when you combine innovation, a diverse leadership, I'm telling you, we are going to create bigger things that not only, if you think about it, when we think about, I'm using AI and I'm creating something, I'm building something to become more efficient. I'm building something in the company to increase our revenue. But what about, I'm creating something to clean the water in the oceans. I'm creating something to actually make sure that we grow more food and let's just measure the crops or something like that. Only diverse backgrounds will think of different things because they come from a country maybe that they saw lack of water. Another one maybe lack of resources on business. Another one lack of resources on like maybe their ocean was never clean and there was a lot of garbage. Like we can bring all of these perspectives together, and having leadership that has that initiative that are diverse will take us places, and we can actually do more good than harm with AI and what's coming.
Yeah, I agree. I think the more folks that we bring into technology and give them an opportunity, that they will find additional opportunities for businesses as well, because they're going to have their own problems from their own backgrounds that are not just lighter skin problems.
Yeah.
In the US, right? So anyway, that's good. That's good. All right. And so for our listeners who might be intimidated by AI or security, and this is my last question for you, what's one simple step they can take today to become more digitally empowered and secure?
So, okay, for those that are listening, actually, if you feel intimidated by AI, or if cybersecurity for you, it feels overwhelming because you think it's too much, just start with one thing. You just want to be curious. Be curious, and be curious enough to listen. Be curious enough to sit down and give it just 1 hour. Just like listen to the podcast, like 1 hour. That's all it takes for you to learn something, to understand something, and even to feel like, you know what, maybe I'll go ahead and try this. So you don't have to become an expert overnight. Just, you can attend trainings, my trainings, anyone's trainings, Udemy, YouTube. There's so many. You listen to podcasts, just like Square X podcast, and just immerse yourself in learning the basics. Because once you do, you become part of this entire revolution of innovation that is taking place, and you don't want to be left behind. You never know if you have ideas that might help you, not just yourself, but your family, your community, and even what I was just talking about. Like, I know it sounds crazy and exaggerative, but like, you don't know if you can actually create something that can help the world, like health and diseases. So when you develop, very important, when you develop a security mindset, you begin to see technology completely different. And like I said, you don't have to be a cybersecurity engineer. You don't have to be an AI anything. You can just be a person who has a different career. But once you adopt the mindset, others that, and I believe that others around you will also adopt that, because they see, like, your friends, your family member, your work coworkers, executive leadership. If you adopt that, we are going to actually look up to you, and they're going to look up to me. So they start adopting everything that it comes with learning and embracing technology. So they learn by watching you. And then together you become more aware, you protect more, and then you become more empowered to create. So I do say something different from the people. Like, it's the same thing, but I want to add on to the people that want to build AI. So you want to ask yourself, what are you building? Why are you building it? What kind of impact do you want it to have? Because you have to understand, you want to be intentional. You also want to be thoughtful, but most importantly, you want to be curious. So you just want to take action. You just want to do it. Remember that what you're creating, children may use it. If you're creating something outside of corporate, employees are going to be using it. So you want to motivate them. And lastly, just remember, and this is the tagline from my company, from Sentient Perspectives, that is, your intelligence has no limits. And you have no idea how powerful you can be until you start doing something.
Agreed. I think that we're living a great time where we have so many resources available to us. I mean, we had, Google and web searching, and that was incredible. We have YouTube and video instruction that's available to us today. And now we're kind of getting into this Gen AI world where AI is making technology and information more accessible. There's so many opportunities to learn, right? And I think that I agree with you. Curiosity is a cornerstone here. And the practical application of it, something you said earlier, is like, take what you've learned and then talk to your friends and your families and your coworkers and get their perspectives, right? Because that's what's going to lead to opportunities and amazing ideas that help the community grow better as well. Felicita, Fifi, it was great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and I'd love to keep having a discussion.
Would love that too. Thanks.
Thank you.